May 7, 1945. A village 40 miles northeast of Leipzig, Germany. The war ended that morning, but for Margaret Pfizer, kneeling in the ruins of her family's bakery, the silence felt more dangerous than the bombs. Her hands moved through broken brick and ash, searching for grain, anything. Her fingers trembled, not from cold, but from weakness. She weighed 78 lb. Before you continue, hit that like button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your engagement helps us bring these forgotten stories to light, and we read every single comment. If you appreciate history told with the depth it deserves, subscribe and share this with someone who values the truth behind the headlines. When the American Jeep rolled into the square, dust rising like smoke behind its wheels, she expected nothing. Liberation meant chaos. Freedom meant starvation. Then, a sergeant stepped out, tall, weathered, farm-bred, and looked at her for a long moment. What he said next would chart a course across an ocean, across a decade, across the invisible border between enemy and family. But in that moment, watching her dig through rubble with bare hands, he realized something that would haunt American occupation policy for years. The war had destroyed more than armies. It had destroyed the capacity to survive. The spring of 1945 arrived in Germany without mercy. By May, widespread food shortages had turned German towns into graveyards of the living. Fields lay bombed into moonscapes. Cities smoldered roads, filled with millions of displaced souls, moving in all directions. Soldiers surrendering, refugees fleeing, survivors searching for anyone they'd lost. Margaret Fisher had been 23 years old when the war began. Before 1939, she'd been a schoolteacher in this town. Her father ran the bakery for 30 years. Her mother taught piano in their parlor, overlooking the Elbe. Her younger brother Klaus was conscripted in 1943 and died at Stalingrad, one of the 850,000 German soldiers who never returned from that frozen hell. By April 1945, the town had become a ghost. The bakery had been requisitioned by the Wehrmacht in 1944, then bombed by Allied aircraft in February. Her father died of a heart attack in the cellar during that raid. Her mother simply stopped eating afterward, fading through March like a photograph left in the sun. Margaret found herself alone in a town that no longer existed, surrounded by rubble, and the constant thunder of artillery was growing closer. The Americans arrived on April 25th, Elba Day. The 69th Infantry Division, 3rd Army, had pushed east from the Rhine through some of the war's final, desperate fighting. By the time they reached the Elbe River and linked up with Soviet forces, everyone knew Germany had lost. What remained was occupation. Margaret had hidden in the bakery cellar for 3 days after the Americans came, not from fear of violence. She'd heard the propaganda about American savagery, but exhaustion mattered more than fear now. She had nothing left. No family, no home, no food. The cellar walls still smelled of flour and yeast, phantom scents from another lifetime. She survived on rainwater collected in a tin bucket and 3 potatoes she'd buried in ash. On the 4th day, she climbed the cellar stairs. The sunlight blinded her. The square was unrecognizable. Rubble had been pushed to the sides. American trucks lined the street. Soldiers moved with purpose, setting up tents, unloading supplies. The sharp foreign sound of their voices filling the air. She stood there, swaying slightly. Her dress hung on her like fabric on wire. Her hair, once thick and dark, had grown brittle. When she caught a reflection in a broken window, she saw a stranger, hollow-eyed gray, already half gone. That's when Sergeant William James Barker saw her, 31 years old, from a small farm outside Tulsa, Oklahoma. He'd landed at Utah Beach 11 months earlier and fought across France, through the Ardennes, across the Rhine. He'd seen towns like this before, dozens of them, bombed and burned and emptied of life. But something about the woman in the square stopped him. She was kneeling in the rubble, digging with her bare hands, not frantically, methodically, like she was performing a ritual she'd performed 100 times before. Her movements were slow, careful. He watched her for a full minute before walking over. "What are you looking for?" he asked in English. She looked up. Her eyes were pale blue, startling in her thin face. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. She held up a handful of dust and grain, mixed together, showed it to him, then let it fall through her fingers like sand. William understood immediately. He'd grown up on a farm during the Dust Bowl. He knew what real hunger looked like, the kind that turns people into ghosts before they die. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a chocolate bar, standard issue, 4 ounces of compressed chocolate oats and skim milk powder, designed to withstand high temperatures and, according to most soldiers, taste only slightly better than a boiled potato. He held it out to her. Margaret stared at the chocolate. She had not seen real food in weeks. Rations in occupied Germany had fallen too near starvation levels. The Allies provided basic distribution, but supplies were chaotic, and thousands of civilians fell through the cracks. But her hands remained at her sides. This had to be a trick. German propaganda had spent years warning them. Why would a soldier give her food? William knelt down beside her in the rubble. He unwrapped the chocolate, broke off a piece, and ate it himself. "See," he said, "safe." Then he held out the rest. Her hand moved. Without conscious thought, she took the chocolate. It felt heavy, substantial, real. She brought it to her mouth. The first taste made her eyes close. Sweetness, richness, calories. Her body awakened with desperate hunger. She forced herself to chew slowly, but her hand shook so badly she nearly dropped it. William watched her eat. He had 2 more rations in his pack. He gave her both. Then he stood, said something in English she didn't understand, and walked back to his jeep. She watched him go, still holding the wrapper, not quite believing what had happened. That evening, in the temporary mess tent, William told his friend Corporal Daniel Reeves about the woman in the square. Danny had grown up in Brooklyn, survived Normandy and the Bulge, grown cynical about most things, but practical about survival. "You gave her your rations," Danny said. "It wasn't a question. She was starving. They're all starving. You can't feed the whole country." William knew that. Statistics documented progressive weight losses of 13 to 15% among German adults through 1945. Studies would later reveal additional losses of 10 to 15% in the months following surrender. But knowing statistics was different from watching a woman dig for grain in the ruins of her family's bakery. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Something in her eyes, not just hunger, dignity. She had been someone before the war destroyed her. He could see it in the way she moved, the way she had knelt in that rubble, searching for grain like an archaeologist, searching for lost civilizations. The next morning, he went back. She was there again. Same spot, digging in the same rubble. He brought more rations. This time, she didn't hesitate. She took them and ate while he watched. He tried to speak to her in slow English, but she only shook her head. A local interpreter eventually helped. An older German man who spoke broken English. Through him, William learned her name. Margaret, teacher, family dead, alone. The interpreter explained the situation. Thousands of German civilians had no food, no shelter, no means of survival. The occupation forces provided basic rations at distribution centers, but supplies were limited, and chaos reigned. Margaret was one of thousands who'd simply disappeared between the cracks. William made a decision that would have gotten him court-martialed if his commanding officer had found out. He started bringing Margaret food every day, not just rations, real food from the army mess. Bread, eggs, sometimes soup in a thermos. He would find her in the square, sit with her while she ate, then leave. She began to gain weight slowly. Her cheeks filled out slightly. Color returned to her face. But more than physical recovery, something else was happening. She started to trust non-fraternization policy, officially prohibited social association between Allied soldiers and Germans. Marriage wasn't explicitly forbidden, but it was heavily discouraged. American servicemen who married Germans were forbidden from entering their wives' homes. The whole policy was designed to maintain distance to prevent exactly what was happening between William and Margaret. But by the third week of May, she was strong enough to walk more than a few blocks. William, on a rare afternoon off, showed her where the American supply depot had been set up. He introduced her to Red Cross workers distributing aid. He made sure she was registered for rations. He did all of this without fanfare, without expecting anything in return. One evening, after he'd walked her back to the cellar where she still lived, she spoke to him in halting English. The interpreter had been teaching her basic phrases. "Why?" she asked. "Why you help me?" William was quiet for a long moment. The sun was setting behind the ruins of the town, painting everything gold and shadow. He thought about his farm in Oklahoma, his mother's kitchen, the way she would feed anyone who showed up at their door during the Depression. Hobos, drifters, neighbors who'd lost everything. His father would complain about wasting food, but his mother never stopped. "Because you needed help," he said finally. It was the simplest answer, the truest answer. But for Margaret, who had spent years in a country that valued strength above compassion, that answer was revolutionary. June arrived with unexpected warmth. William's unit received notice. They would be shipping out to France, then possibly home. The war in the Pacific had ended with atomic fire over Japan in August. But William would be leaving in July. He had 3 weeks. He spent nearly every free hour with Margaret. Their relationship was undefined. Not quite friendship. Not quite romance. Something deeper and stranger. She was learning English rapidly. His German was improving. They would sit in the square, now partially cleared of rubble, and talk for hours. She told him about teaching children, about her family, about the slow collapse of everything she'd known. He told her about Oklahoma, about farming wheat and cotton, about thunderstorms that rolled across the plains like freight trains. She asked him once if he had killed anyone. It was a direct question, startling in its honesty. "Yes," he said. He didn't elaborate. The weight of that single word hung between them. "Are you sorry?" she asked, for stopping. "The people who did this to you?" He gestured at the ruined town. "No, for having to do it." Yes, she understood the distinction. The war had forced everyone into impossible positions. Moral clarity was a luxury neither side could afford. One afternoon in mid-June, something shifted. William found Margaret at the bakery ruins, sitting on what had been the front step, staring at nothing. Tears streaked her face. Not crying, just tears, as if her body was finally releasing years of held grief. He sat beside her, didn't speak, just sat. After a long time, she said in quiet English, "I have nothing. No family, no home. When you leave, I will have nothing." Again, the words hit him harder than he expected. He'd been trying not to think about leaving, about what would happen to her. He turned to for the evening light, made everything look soft, unreal. "Come with me," he said. She looked at him, not understanding. "When I leave, come with me to America." It was an insane suggestion. The War Brides Act had passed in December 1945, designed to expedite admission of alien spouses of American servicemen. But the process was complicated. It required marriage, documentation, background checks. German nationals faced extra scrutiny. Her father's membership in the local business guild would be questioned. Had he supported the Nazi Party? The answer, like most answers in Germany, was complicated. But William was serious, completely serious. "How?" she asked. "I don't know yet, but I'll find a way." Over the next week, William investigated every possible avenue. He talked to the chaplain, 2 officers, 2 Red Cross officials. The answer was always the same: possible, but difficult. There were procedures, applications, background checks. It could take months, maybe years, and marriage was required. He proposed to her on June 20th, 1945, in the ruins of her family's bakery. No ring, no elaborate speech. "Margaret, will you marry me and come to Oklahoma?" she said. Yes. Before he finished the sentence, the wedding was arranged quickly through the military chaplain. Chaplain Robert Morrison, originally from Michigan, had performed dozens of such marriages. He understood that love bloomed in strange places during war, that sometimes survival and affection became inseparable. The ceremony took place on June 27th, in a small, undamaged church on the outskirts of town. Margaret wore a dress provided by Red Cross volunteers. William wore his dress uniform. The witnesses were Corporal Danny Reeves and the interpreter who had facilitated their first real conversation. The chaplain spoke in English, then German, then English. Again, "Do you, William James Barker, take this woman? Do you, Margaret Fisher, take this man?" They did. They said the words. They signed the papers. After the ceremony, William took both of Margaret's hands and his face was serious and tense. "You're mine now," he said. The interpreter translated. The phrase, in German, sounded different. Protective, rather than possessive. "Du bursts. You belong to me now, not as property, but as family. As someone to be cared for, protected, brought home." Margaret understood. She was his responsibility now, and he was hers. In a world that had fallen apart, they were building something together. The paperwork began immediately. Margaret was officially registered as the spouse of an American serviceman. She received temporary papers. A visa application was submitted. The wheels of immigration, slow and grinding, began to turn. William's unit shipped out in early July. Margaret couldn't go with him yet. The visa process would take months. She would have to wait in Germany alone again, but this time with papers, with status, with a future. Their last night together, they sat in the square where they'd first met. Summer air was warm. Somewhere in the distance, someone was playing an accordion. Rebuilding had progressed. Some buildings had been partially repaired. Life was returning, slowly, painfully, but undeniably. "I will send for you," William said. "As soon as the papers clear. As soon as you can travel." "I will wait," Margaret said. Her English had improved dramatically. "I promise." He gave her everything before he left. Money, Red Cross contacts, ration cards, instructions written in English and German. He made sure she had food, a place to stay, a chance. The morning his unit departed, she stood, waiting by the convoy, wearing the same dress from their wedding. Her hair was pinned neatly. Her eyes were afraid. They had 90 seconds. William held her face, memorizing it. "I love you," he said, his first time saying it. "I love you," she answered in English. Then he was gone, swallowed by dust and distance. 9 months passed. Margaret lived in the boarding house he arranged, translating for the American Occupation Administration. She wrote to him weekly, letters full of pen struggle, dreams of Oklahoma. His replies came slowly, describing wheat fields, red dirt, and his mother's kitchen with gingham curtains. The visa process dragged through endless forms and questions. Her father's ties to the Nazi Guild were scrutinized. She told the truth. He'd complied to survive, but paper could not show the difference between compliance and belief. In February 1946, the letter arrived. Visa approved. Bremerhaven, then New York, then Oklahoma. She wept. Relief and terror mingling. Leaving meant freedom, but also farewell. She visited the ruined bakery one last time. Spring pressed through the rubble, kneeling where he'd found her. She whispered, "Goodbye, Papa, Mama, Klaus. I'm going to America now. I'm going to live 12 days across the Atlantic." She was sick, but grateful. New York rose through fog. The Statue of Liberty, gleaming like promise. Ellis Island stamped her papers. Mrs. William Barker, permanent resident William, met her in Tulsa on March 15th. He looked thinner, older, but when he saw her, his face broke into the same boyish smile. They stood on the platform, silent, then fell into each other's arms. "You made it," he said. "I promised." Years unfolded like wheat, slow and steady. Margaret learned English, baked pies, joined church circles. Some neighbors stayed distant, but enough drew close. She became simply Mrs. Barker, William's wife, mother of 4, yet she never forgot. On quiet nights, she sat on the porch, remembering rubble, hunger, and the man who had offered her chocolate. William would ask, "I am remembering." In 1945, a soldier chose kindness over orders. From that choice grew a family, a farm, a life, something beautiful from the ruins of a broken